Checking out this video proving that the Bible is the truth. I don't know what they came up with, what details they've proven through science, but we're about to find out.
Our physical reality is a shadow of a larger reality.
Shit, my bad.
Our physical reality is a shadow of a larger reality. And I was blown away when I first saw that, because that's exactly what the Bible's been saying all along.
So it's basically saying if we're a shadow, we're in a lower dimension.
Worlds. Einstein made scientific history by recognizing that we really live in 4 dimensions by adding time to the mix. Time is a physical property.
Is it really?
We know that we live in
motion.
At least 10. That's the current dimensions. 4 of them are directly, we can experience them. But we know there's 6 others that we can't get at directly, but we know we can infer their existence mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
What makes that provocative to people who've discovered that is that a Hebrew sage by the name of Maimonides, back in the 13th century, predicted that from studying the text of Genesis. He concluded that our universe has 10 dimensions, only 4 are knowable, to use his term, and 6 are not knowable to us. And I find that fascinating.
How would you find them then? How would you know?
Millions of dollars on atomic accelerators to discover what Maimonides did by studying the text. So the 10, some say 11, there's some debates among mathematicians about details, but there's
some say
26
26
within the advanced scientific community that we live in more than just the 4 dimensions that we directly experience. If we take those things that are larger than us, larger than man's reach, and just lump that and call that the macrocosm, we suddenly are confronting astronomy, astrophysics, those kinds of things. The great discovery of 20th century science is that the universe is finite. It may be expanding, but it's finite. And that has staggering implications. That means it has a beginning, and it'll ultimately have an end. And that's what gives rise to these conjectures that go under the label of the Big Bang theories. There's 4 of them. None of them quite satisfactory, but that's the common conjecture, if you will. The point being, that's an acknowledgement of the fact that we're dealing with a finite universe that had an origin. But the fact that it's finite is my point at the moment. If we go the other way, looking at what's smaller than man, call that the microcosm, that gets even weirder.
What, the quantum realm? Is that what you're talking about?
If we took, say, a length, a piece of string or something, and we cut it in half, we take whatever we have left and cut it in half again. And at least, maybe not physically, but conceptually, you think we could, whatever we have left, we can cut in half. It turns out, we discover, shockingly,
the Planck length?
10 to the minus 33 centimeters, and you try to divide that.
It's probably like the same amount of energy is pushing back on you. So it's kind of, you gotta find something smaller than the Planck length, but you really can't. So is the Planck length the smallest length that you can go? Because that's what he's talking about. It's something that's indivisible, undividable, unimaginable. The Planck length, the limit of our reality, I guess.
Uses a property called locality, and that there's a term in physics of
what does that mean?
A characteristic called locality, and that observation has actually been proven in the laboratory. In 1987, they actually demonstrated non-locality. Every photon in the universe somehow is directly connected to every other photon, and that defies our normal thinking of space, if you will. But the point I'm getting at is, we live in what we call physical reality has a limit in smallness.
That's cool, man.
And we call it the Planck wall, because whether it's length, mass, energy,
same, when you stop them, they're the same thing.
It's made up of units that you can't divide. So there's a limit to smallness. There's a limit to largeness. So what we discover we're what we call physical reality is a digital simulation. And there was an article in Scientific American, June of 2005.
If it's kind of like, you say it's a simulation, right? But at the same time, what proof is there that it isn't? If it went infinitely, if the speed of light was simultaneously, is that would make it not a simulation? Because it has a limit on how much and how far you can do, it makes it a simulation. I don't know.
which was
But
dealing primarily with the
it's
fact
possible.
that
It's a high
constants in
probability,
physics seem to
too.
be changing. But they make the
Hologram theory.
observations profound that if the constants of physics are changing, that implies that our physical reality is a shadow of a larger reality. And I was blown away when I first saw that, because that's exactly what the Bible's been saying all along. And so that leads to a conjecture that the universe, created with 10 dimensions, something occurred to restrict us to the 4 that we experience. Many of us,
Like a
because
rubber
of
band?
passages in the Bible, Romans 8, and that in Genesis 3, when God declares war because of the fall of man, the creation was made subject to the bondage of decay,
It's so close to
the
his
entropy
lips.
laws and all that. Apparently, we're somehow tied to God's curse on the everything we know about the creation is post-curse.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the curse, it may have had 10 dimensions, and for some reason it was fractionated. So that some of us tend to regard those 6 inaccessible dimensions as the domain of things like angels, the domain of paranormal behavior. And it's our suspicion that the UFOs somehow are trafficking from those dimensions into ours. And that it turns out that if you try to speak about dimensions more than 3 or 4, the average person can't relate to it without special training. There are only 2 people that really relate to that. That's mathematicians with special training or small children. And so
Children. That makes sense.
We can learn a lot about dimensionality by going the other way. You and I are 3-dimensional beings.
They don't have boundaries.
Imagine if we had a 2-dimensional universe, a piece of paper or a flat plane.
That suck.
We could imagine at least 2-dimensional beings in there. If we had 2 of those, getting from one to the other by them would be unthinkable. But we as a 3rd-dimensional being could pick them up and move them over. To them, a miracle has happened beyond their understanding.
Mm-hmm.
If I, as a 3-dimensional being, put my finger through their 2-dimensional world, they wouldn't see my finger. They'd see a thing that was a ring, and then it would shrink. If a ball passed through, it would appear as a dot that would become a ring. In other words,
It
only would be seeing the intersection of that 3-dimensional thing with their 2-dimensional world. So we begin to get some feeling for what dimension. Another example, if I have 2 beings there in that 2-dimensional world,
God, man,
I
that'd
could
be
put my
dope.
finger a
Don't
millionth
rewind
of
it.
an inch away
Don't rewind
from
it,
each
bro.
of them, no matter where they are. I can enjoy greater intimacy with each of them than they can with each other. So we suddenly read the whole concept of an additional dimension starts to, you get a feeling for what that might mean. At the evening of the resurrection, they were gathered in a
orange
room,
head.
frightened, doors were locked, 6-sided space, 4 walls, a floor and a ceiling. They're there, nervous. And who shows up right in the middle but Jesus himself?
Shows
At first
up,
they're
huh?
frightened, naturally, confused, thinking maybe he's a spirit or something, and he challenges them. He says, handle me and see. A spirit doesn't have flesh and bone as you see me have. So he, in his resurrection body, has some peculiar properties, because he apparently, obviously, has the ability to enter and leave a 6-sided space without passing
6-sided
through
space?
the 6 sides. And a mathematician can deal with it. There's ways of mathematically dealing with that. To a mathematician that's skilled here, he would argue that it would take at least 11 dimensions to do that the way it's...
What if, how they're saying right now, we can do math, and math is a 2D thought information form, right? What if for us to understand the 4th and the 5th dimension, so we have to write in 3D to understand the 4th dimension? So how do you do that? How do you write 3D? Because right now, we write in 2D. Even if we wrote like whatever, H in 3D, it's still a 2D thought. How do you write new mathematics for 3D? If that makes sense, leave that in the comment section, man. That's just, I don't know, that just came out of nowhere. If we can write 3D and not just have 2D things, we might be able to figure out.
seems to be described. Fine, whatever it is, it is. John, in his first letter, in chapter 3, verse 2, makes an interesting remark. He says, Beloved, it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we shall know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. What I hear that saying is that we will enjoy the same dimensionality he has. If I show you a picture of me, I'm showing you a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object.
Yeah, that's a picture. That's what we're looking at right now. That's how you see me right now. I'm 3D. I'm a person. But when it comes to you, you see me in 2D with width and height. Everything else you don't get. You don't get the smell. You don't get the sound. You don't get this behind the back of me. This the, you know.
Comprehensive. We shall see him as we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So that gives us a glimpse of what the resurrection body that the Bible talks about deals with. But again, see, we're going into what would be called technically a hyperspace, more than 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do with. I spend more of my time, as I try to promote the Bible in various contexts, I spend most of my time undoing the effects of bad science. Most of what we're taught in college, not just high schools, is not true. Astronomy is obsessed with gravity, and if you get outside the solar system itself, gravity becomes a non-player. The plasma physicists have been trying to tell us that for years. No one's listening. So that's why we did Beyond Newton as our...
Gravity doesn't matter once you leave Earth.
The electric sky, the fact that when you get out to galaxies, you're talking about electrical behavior, not gravitational behavior. The astronomy world hasn't discovered that because gravity's instinctive.
We're in it right now.
The James Clerk Maxwell equations are not instinctive. They're very... It takes very special study. They behave very different. And that's what David Bohm got so coming out of the plasma world became so fascinated with, and he's the one that predicted at least the possibility that the universe may be really some kind of super hologram. And now they're beginning to get some suggestive evidence that may be true. But again, the scientific community continually, well, I should put it the other way, our educational establishment continues to feed the kids stuff that is just not true. The nebular hypothesis, the birth of the planets, provably not true, and yet it's still taught at the college level. If you take a course in astronomy, you'll get exposed to the so-called nebular hypothesis. And not that it's shreddable, it's mathematically impossible. You've got 99% of the mass is in the sun, and yet 99% of the angular momentum in the planets.
Yeah.
How do you get there? It turns out you can't. They were brought here. And what's so interesting, as we learn more of good science, it's converging to the very image the Bible tells in the first place. The 4 dimensions that Einstein discovered are listed in Ephesians 3:18.
Did he say that? Einstein discovered the dimensions? Really? We've been here all this time and we didn't know the dimensions? May be able to comprehend with all saint what is the width, length, depth, height. Okay.
You could go on and on, example after example, the zero-point energy. Some of the most advanced concepts in the field of astrophysics are in the Bible, but just not recognized because of that disjuncture.
All right, yeah. What do y'all think, man? Does it prove it? Well, I guess it does if it comes up in the Bible and we discover it so much later. Dang, I'm tired, bro. I'm really dozing right now. Jeez. It's like I'm in science class or history class right now. But like I was saying, I feel like the only way we can actually understand the 4th dimension is if we're able to write 3-dimensional problems in 3D space, not just on paper. We write 3rd-dimensional problems in 2-dimensionals. So why can't we write 3-dimensionals, 4-dimensionals, and 3-dimensional? All right, man. I'm confusing myself a little bit, but I know what I'm talking about. Mawa. Leave me suggestions of what you want to see next. If it's Anunnaki, UFOs, aliens, let me know. God.